This is Echoes, a Ukrant podcast. In this podcast, Christien Boomsma, Rob van der Wal, and me, Tom Wilcox, will introduce you to remarkable people and extraordinary events in 400 years of UG history, ranging from persecuted Scottish students fleeing to 17th century Groningen to a Russian spy seducing a UG physicist. This is The Rebel Preacher, about a Scottish rebel who came to Groningen in 1683. Please be advised, in this episode there is some mention of violence. Robert Hamilton was absolutely sure God himself was present in the consistory of Groningen's Martinikerk. It was May 10th, 1683, and he was looking at the face of a 21-year-old boy who had just become an official minister. The boy's face seemed to give off light. So yes, it was perfectly clear that the Holy Spirit had descended into this austere meeting room of the ancient church. His chest contracted, and he could no longer contain his emotions. Robert Hamilton of Preston, one of the leaders of the radical Scottish Covenanters, a man who had fought in several battles and was now living as an exile in the Netherlands, began to weep with emotion. He was not the only one. Tears flowed profusely that day. His friends and supporters from the Scottish community in Groningen and Leeuwarden also shed their tears. And then there were the members of the Classis and the Reformed Synod, local and national delegates of the Dutch Reformed Church. They too were moved to tears. And for good reason. For now that 21-year-old James Renwick had been officially confirmed as minister, the Scottish Covenant community had a pastor again after many years. Someone who was allowed to preach and baptise for the community. He had gone through a lot to get this far. After all, James was hunted in his homeland. And if he returned, he ran the risk of being imprisoned or even hanged. Many others before him had suffered this exact fate. And yet, James wanted nothing more than to return to his beloved Scotland. He wanted to preach and baptise there to the thousands of members of the strict Puritan movement in Scotland to which he belonged. But because these did not recognise the authority of the Anglican monarch, they were persecuted. The Covenanters had originally emerged after Charles I made changes to the liturgy. Thousands of Scots protested against it by signing a national covenant. But the conflict hardened into a political struggle. Soon, Covenanters felt that the government had no say in matters of faith anyway. Armed rebellions followed, as did government persecution. By the time young James Renwick went to study theology in Edinburgh in 1681, the Covenanters' last minister, Donald Cargill, had been executed. And James? He was right there. He stood in the crowd as Cargill addressed the people. "God knows I climbed this ladder with less fear and less pain in my soul than I climbed the pulpit to preach," he said. For James, this was when everything changed. Until then, he had been an ordinary theology student, but now he became one of the leaders of the rebellion. And because no one was allowed to baptise or preach after Cargill's death, he decided to go to the Netherlands. There, the universities were still Reformed strongholds, so there he could become a pastor. It soon turned out Groningen was the place for him. Universities in Holland were not an option. English spies swarmed Holland in the 17th century. They constantly kept an eye on Scottish exiles, sometimes even arresting them. The English were afraid, rightly so by the way, that the Scots were preparing a coup. The north of the country was safer. A spy would immediately stand out in the small Scottish community there. James had the choice between Franeker University and the University of Groningen. But Franeker was not rigorous enough for a conservative like James. So he and his friends William Boyd and John Flint ended up in Groningen in December 1682. They did not officially enroll, but they attended lectures by the professor of theology, Johannes a Mark. The latter had been appointed only a year earlier, but was known for his ramrod-straight dogmatism. An ideal teacher, therefore, for the Puritan James. And he learned at lightning speed. After only a few months of study, James was able to appear before the Groningen classes as early as May 1683. These would confirm him as pastor, and then he would return to Scotland to preach. The examination lasted no fewer than 3 hours. And James did not mince words. He openly protested against the way church services, for example, were conducted. He even considered the use of organs sinful. He also pertinently refused to swear by the Heidelberg Catechism, the Dutch Creed, and the Dort Doctrines, as Reformed people in the Netherlands did. He felt these went against his faith. But the people in Groningen were patient. They heard the criticism and gave him permission to swear on the Westminster Confession. That was something James could agree to. Moreover, they paid the cost of the ceremony for him. And so, he was finally confirmed and could begin his career as a preacher. What James did not know at that moment was that his confirmation had been touch and go. After all, there was a lot of resistance to the strict Scots. More moderate Scottish pastors had written long protest letters to those involved in Leeuwarden and Groningen, accusing the students of licentious behaviour. When that did not help, they even came to the city in person. Fortunately for James, they arrived 1 day late in doing so. They did manage to stop the swearing in of his friends. Hamilton felt that Flint was not yet ready for the swearing in and demanded that he call in sick for the ceremony. Only when the people in Groningen suggested that Hamilton could carry Flint to the church did Hamilton have to confess what was actually going on. Flint even got into a big argument with James, believing the latter had something to do with Hamilton's actions. He returned to Scotland and preached there without being confirmed. He wasn't officially confirmed until 1698. And James Renwick? He returned to Scotland in June of 1683. From then on, he lived the life of a fugitive rebel and preacher. He preached mainly in the open, but sometimes broke into churches at night. Several times he only narrowly escaped arrest. Meanwhile, he became increasingly radicalized. In November 1684, he drafted a statement declaring secular authorities enemies of God and murderous predators. He had the declaration nailed to several church doors. The English Crown Council subsequently threatened his supporters with the death penalty. The university library even still has a pamphlet offering £100 sterling to whoever captured the seditious field preacher, dead or alive. James managed to stay out of the hands of the authorities for another 4 years while travelling and secretly preaching. But finally he was arrested on February the 1st, 1688. Is this the boy the whole country has been so worried about? A guard wondered in prison. James stubbornly continued to refuse to swear the oath of allegiance to King James VII, who was now on the throne. And that sealed his fate. He was hanged on February 17th, 1688, in Edinburgh in the Grass Market. His head and hands were cut off and hung from the gates of the city. You can still visit the consistory room of Groningen's Martinikerk, where Renwick was confirmed. Check the Martinikerk's website for guided tours. More literature can be found in the show notes. This episode was written and researched by Klaas van Berkel and Christien Boomsma. Sound by Rob van der Wal. Voice by Tom Wilcox.